Yeah, that is a good intro. Ooh, got me riled back up into some 90s metal, which actually works out just fine if you've been catching up or watching the X-Men 97 which launched this week. So, way to have a nice 90s tune pull here, or at least thematically. This is enough to keep going. I'm your host DBQ Hams, coming in with the idle chit-chat of the week. This is the week of March 24th. This is episode 331. Joining me tonight is Game Logic. Game, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. Look, if you or anybody in the audience sees me, like if you're, don't be put off by me squinting at the screen. I'm having a really bad allergy day, and my eyes are just constantly watering. So,
okay, that's good.
It's all ops normal.
It is not that our commentary is making you cringe a little bit, which it's very possible. But we will push on through. Thank you for being here. Thank you for running the boards. We've got our regular lineup of tonight in terms of some new stuff that we've been playing. Then we'll dive into our news headlines and round it out with anything else we've been playing for the week. Again, if you are joining us live, feel free to leave any chat message, and we are glad to be have you part of the dialogue as we go through the show. So first off, while this is March Madness in college basketball, it is also the formal kickoff of the Major League Baseball season. So I've been playing MLB the Show 24 through Game Pass. I guess this is the fourth year now that it's been a launch game day one on Game Pass. Also as it launches on Switch and PlayStation 5. I think it's still on PlayStation 4 as well. So, because there is both a Series X and a Xbox One version in the Xbox Store as well. MLB The Show 24. It's MLB The Show. It's pretty. Works really good. It's good game of baseball, right? It's not like they added the perfect pitch kind of joystick motion fighting game style control of pitching for what they did a few years ago. Kind of the big additions this year seem to be so far. Big additions are the second season of the Negro Leagues. We get Hank Aaron. We get a few other people here. We also get the first female professional baseball player in the majors, and which was in the Negro Leagues. And that storyline and through line is also plays out in their Road to the Show. Road to the Show is their My Career mode. You have the choice of being either a male or female character. And if you choose a female character, you get there's an additional kind of storyline that kind of runs along with it, and it runs kind of parallel. I've started both male and female Road to the Show player in order to kind of see the differences, and it's you get the same kind of beats in terms of going to the combine, going through the draft, in meeting with your coach in AA. But it also, if you're a female player, there are additional unique commentary lines for the announcers. There are additional kind of recorded live action scenes. Right? For the past couple of years, MLB The Show has done talking heads, more of a Zoom aspect with individuals. Now they're back into a studio to provide some MLB Network analysis, which is nice to have a few people around the desk and not just kind of recorded and sent in audio or video. Not that it was more produced, but it definitely kind of had this COVID feel of how can we do this in a way. So in the female storyline version, there is another female character, another ball player with you, who is also going to the combine, gets drafted. In my case, I'm a pitcher, so this was an infielder. If you're an infielder or if you're a fielder, if you're anything but a pitcher, the other player will be a pitcher, because in the dialogue, sometimes it even references that. But it's really interesting in terms of the dialogue, and it hits on kind of the significance and importance. And there are some dialogue choices in terms of how your character is dealing with that. But then you also get some additional interactions with your teammates in the clubhouse in terms of being a first female ball player in the minors. Right, so there are some nice things that it does in terms of story, and one of the things, which is great, and I'm just kind of laying all that out there for to have a sense of what it is. The male story is pretty similar to what it's been, and again, I think the road to the show, I have not done it nearly as deeply in this generation as I did last generation. So much to the fact that I'm still playing some of the last generation road to the show. But one of the things that they did here is it feels less about your loadouts as it did the last 2 years. There was a lot of emphasis on your loadouts, the kind of perks, and that was very much kind of front and center. And now it is still there, and it is still helpful and beneficial, but it's also not kind of the first thing that you see. Wow, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here for the show as well. So
DBQ, one question I need to ask you, because I caught a drum beat in the voice track that caught me off guard. So the female participation is just a female participant in current modern day baseball. It's not like I had assumed it was like a female league.
No, it is like you are a breakthrough player, and you are the first female ever drafted, or you and your companion player, I guess, the other NPC that is going along with you as kind of a way to bounce conversation and dialogue off back and forth. So yes, I am a solo female on a team of males. And so yeah, I mean, at the same time, it gives me a little bit more of a incentive to kind of push through and see what it looks like, what kind of storylines I get when I get to the AAA and when I get to the majors eventually. Like, because they've crafted some additional storylines here, or additional analysis and dialogue, it is giving me a reason to play that is just above and beyond the new rookie kind of coming up, making their way through the minors, which has been the road to the show for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and so this is kind of a forward leaning, because there has been discussion about women being allowed to play in MLB, in Major League Baseball here, I don't know, going back, just like within the last year. So I guess this is kind of,
yeah, it's definitely a little out there. Even in the fan communities around it, there's been there's both excitement, but there's also kind of pushback of the trade-off, similar to what 2K and Visual Concepts got when they added the NWA of, if they're spending resources here but not updating other things or not putting more into franchise or something else, right? Like, there is that potential trade-off, but to me, it has the potential to open it up to a whole lot of more players, and regardless of gender, and provide a sense of agency in that. So I think it's a really great thing that they're doing. I'll be really curious to kind of keep going with it to see what it ends up with.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, just we like to cover stuff on here on the show to kind of inform other people. So to me, those are different, right? When
yes, I would say that they're different, right? Like, adding the WNBA, which is a professional women's league, adding women players into FIFA Ultimate Team, which has its own professional league, right? This is much more kind of on the edge of of pushing, of advocating to some degree, right? Like it is saying, it is allowing it to be a video game. I think you could go the other way as well, right? And say that it's also the feel good story in a video game is there and allows it to have a sense of identity regardless of gender.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so there is nothing today that prohibits women from playing in baseball. So the blurb here is back in 1952, the MLB banned women from participating in major league or affiliated minor league teams. However, this prohibition was lifted as many as 4 decades later, with Melissa Mayhew becoming the first woman to make MLB's international registration list. So women are not prohibited or banned from playing in the MLB. It's just simply no players have developed yet to the point to make anybody's roster, and there are women who are administratively registered as players in the league. They just haven't made any teams yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? And I think you're seeing this a little bit more with girls playing on national little league teams and having it be a co-ed little league team. So there are, it is a long developmental pipeline to suddenly have people, regardless of gender, to be able to play at a pro level, and it takes a lot of development, which it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yes, I mean, so there's that piece. I think the one other piece that is enjoyable within the road to the show is the way that they've, I feel like they've kind of backed off a little bit in terms of the direction they were going with having your road to the show player be able to also then go into Diamond Dynasty, which is the card collecting one. That's no longer the case. So it feels a little more, I don't know, from the last few years, it feels a little more like it is intentional, but also like it's not trying to balance and have certain things that are required because of Diamond Dynasty in the online aspects. Diamond Dynasty is the card collecting ultimate team type. Like there's always a lot of programs. I know programs in terms of like, different activities to do to earn additional cards. It is one of the more kind of monetary friendly ones that there's a lot you can do grinding it out. It's also not a space that I spend a lot of time in. I also did play some March to October, which is the kind of play the moments through a franchise, through a season. They started a couple years ago. Last year, they added a little more franchise management aspect in it, in terms of salary caps, things like that, but not nearly at the level of the actual franchise, which goes much more into the financials. The March to October is, for me, it's such a great mode because it allows you to, you're playing 3 innings of a game. You're jumping into the 6th inning, or you're jumping into the 7th when it's close, or you're holding on to a lead. It in terms of having the time to play through in a complete 9-inning game, the March to October makes that pretty convenient in terms of advancing through a season. So that is kind of runs down the one of the other pieces that I've just got into the Negro League history pieces a little bit here, but one of the features that they've added is that you do have the ability just to watch kind of the documentaries aspect, even if you're not playing through the game challenges. So if you get stuck on a game challenge, you can still go through and learn some of the history stuff. So, which is great as well. The production value there is excellent. They've partnered with the Negro History Museum and Hall of Fame, and so there's the lots of both this year and last year, right? Lots of care and intentionality given to the Negro League. So, all right. Anything else?
Yeah. So while we are covering that though, but so you were playing on Xbox.
Yes.
Yep. Series X.
Correct. Yep.
And so one thing that does bear mentioning is alongside this, we do have reports of people who are playing on the Nintendo Switch having issues As far as I can understand, even the Nintendo Life designated reviewer from their editorial staff was having problems, and there is a Reddit thread out there of people reporting problems of not being able to play specifically the Diamond Dynasty mode, which, as you mentioned, there's a bucket of players who never play that mode, never touch it, so anything associated with it, the microtransactions, all that kind of crazy hoopla, that's the type of thing, and we're going to talk a little bit about microtransactions tonight and what bothers people and what doesn't, and that's the type of thing where, when there's a consumer-based outcry about those microtransactions, I'm like, okay, whatever. Like I don't touch it. Doesn't bother me. Same thing with, with EA's football club now, Madden, like all these games that have like microtransactions associated with opening packs, and whatever. But I did want to put that information out there. So the recommendation right now, as far as what I've seen, I haven't seen any recent updates. I haven't gone looking for them. So maybe there was an update today, but recommendation right now is if you're gonna go with a version, like don't go with the Switch version right now, unless you absolutely have to. And if Switch is your only option, maybe give it some time to get itself fixed and sorted out. If Diamond Dynasty matters to you, me personally, I hear a game has a problem with an entire mode, I'm probably just staying away from the game entirely, because I just don't. Now I'm sketchy and I don't have a ton of confidence that there's not something else broken that hasn't been reported yet. Which is another thing, yet again, tonight that we're going to talk about is when reviewers play games and don't report things.
So let's jump right into that, because that's a nice segue. So we've got a couple Dragon's Dogma 2 news stories here, Game. I'll let you, since you've teed them up nicely, go ahead and keep running with them.
So the first story over on Polygon by Michael McWhorter, Dragon's Dogma 2's save system is a minefield. And this is kind of let's say it's an appetizer to the main course. So in a quote, Dragon's Dogma 2 takes an unorthodox approach with many of its gameplay systems, from its reliance on slow travel. Kind of a neatly written sentence there. Basically calling normal travel slow travel rather than accelerated travel, fast travel. Reliance on slow travel to its loss gauge system that punishes players for dying repeatedly. Another aspect of Capcom's game that's similarly onerous is its save system. Dragon's Dogma 2 bucks tradition when it comes to player choice concerning saves. There's no save scumming on this role-playing game. So there's a lot more detail than even the thing that bugs me about the save system, which is on PC. You get it at least deployed with one save slot. Now there's been a discussion that they're going to go back and fix that, but why that grates against me as a PC player, because that would be one of the options of where I wanted to play. PC gamers, particularly people who build their PCs these days with motherboards that come with 2-3 NVMe slots, highly likely that they build their rigs with multiple terabytes available of storage. And so to roll out an open world RPG, and we're gonna mention that a couple times tonight, because that brings baggage and certain expectations along with it. My expectation, and PC gamers, the way a lot of them will play these games, is to have multiple runs going with like different characters. And making different choices, because some of them will have an evil run going, some of them will have a good run going. I would expect to have more than one save slot. So, but on top of that, there's apparently even issues with the kind of checkpoint save system, with all sorts of issues, and those issues are associated with you dying, which will also anchor into our next topic. Now, Larian Studios games, Baldur's Gate doesn't do it, but prior Larian Studios games, Divinity Original Sin, etc., you would have resurrection scrolls that would be available, because there are consequences associated with a team member being killed or being damaged, hurt, down to the point where actually all of their hit points get eliminated, which is something that is kind of, if you're familiar with playing in Dungeons and Dragons, that is kind of how, like, it's kind of how you're not as immediately subjected to dying up front, but there are consequences when you get down to a certain point, right? So in most tabletop role-playing games, the systems have historically been, you typically have something that is like an energy score, and then you have something that is your hit points. And when you you take, and if there is a game that has like an energy score, then you take damage primarily. You can take damage to either hit points or energy, but what the point is once one is depleted, then it starts impacting the other. And when it starts eating into your hit points, typically that's the point where you lose. That's when you get down to 0 hit points. That's the point where you lose consciousness. and then you have to take some amount of damage after that before the character's actually dead, and can't be brought back. But a lot of these games have this convention of some type of resurrection scroll. But resurrection scroll, the equivalent of that in Dragon's Dogma, is something that is available on a limited basis. And that brings us to our next topic, DBQ. Before I get into microtransactions, anything that you want to comment just on the save problem?
Well, I think the only other piece there is that save problem goes hand in hand with the other news stories we're seeing in terms of how it's running on PC. And it doesn't seem very optimized. It's having a number of issues depending on your graphical settings and other pieces. Again, a lot of that hopefully is all something that gets ironed out with patches. There's not necessarily, that is a performance piece more than a design choice with the save system. So, and another design choice is a whole lot of microtransactions.
And what you would hope is like those performance problems don't directly lead to you dying, right? Which then impacts the thing and then impacts the other thing, right? So our second news story also over on Polygon. Wait. No, actually,
yeah, it's on Polygon. Your other, yep, microtransactions, surprise microtransactions.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. This story over on Polygon by Ollie Welsh. Dragon Dogma's 2 surprise microtransactions are making people angry, but should they? And what was it? Was it EA who called loot boxes like what is it? Surprise game mechanics? Was there euphemism?
That was their defense of loot boxes. Surprise.
So this article starts. Capcom's fantasy role-playing game Dragon's Dogma 2 has launched at last to critical acclaim. But reactions from some players are much harsher. At the center of these complaints is a suite of 21 downloadable items. They're not really downloadable items, but there is another PR term running around calling them DLC. Downloadable items Capcom released without warning alongside Dragon's Dogma 2 across PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Most of them are single-use in-game items enabling features like new fast travel locations, the ability to change characters' appearances, and combat revives. So here are a few problems associated with this. And while I'm talking about this, I want to bring up the Steam page as well.
Yes, as you do that, I'll call out Wara's in the chat here. Activatable items, right? Like that is, you can activate these from a free-to-play microtransaction model. It feels very much thrown into this mix. So go ahead. You've got the Steam page up with all 21 of those activatable items.
Yeah, I wasn't even going for that, but yes, it is a rather long, intimidating list when you pop it open. Let's see, Explorer's Camping Kit, Dogma music and sound collection. I think custom sounds. I think that's less of a real impactful microtransaction. Harpy Snare Smoke Beacons, Heartfelt Pendant, Ambivalent Rift Increase, Makeshift Gale Key, Artifact for more. But lots of these you can't really discern what they're associated with. The port crystal is the thing that allows you, which can be a set of destinations of choice. You use a fairy stone to instantly transport.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I thought the fairy stone was the thing that was actually the fast travel thing. I guess this is the port crystal enables the fairy, so it is the fast travel thing.
Yes, the fairy stones are not a microtransaction according to that Polygon article, but the port crystals are.
Yeah. A wake stone, which is the thing that restores the dead back to life. Rift crystals, which is used to hire pawns. And that's it. Main reason I want to open up this page is the point of this and why the author is talking about the difference between critical reviews by journalists at gaming media outlets versus Steam community reviews. Steam community reviews are at 51% of the 33,000 people who have reviewed the game. So that second number, that 33,000, that's enough people to be a trend, right? That's not, when I talked about Suicide Squad and we mentioned that it had really positive reviews on Steam, it was at a very small population sample of people who had actually written reviews. But this is a really large number of people. Specifically, I wanted to. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the piece, and I haven't looked into this. The question I would have with those Steam reviews, right? If the PC port we know is not good, right? Is the review of the game, how it runs on the platform? Is the review I think that's the difference in a critical review of what used to be a critical review, right? Like it is about the systems and gameplay, and not necessarily the economic models around it.
So let's talk a little bit about the game, right? About the reviews going around. The journalists who have reviewed the game, and now I got to pull that up. I want to say it's at mid 80s on Metacritic. Sorry.
No, that's okay. WA, I agree with you that they saw WA a lot of performance reviews as well. So in terms of talking about the performance issues, which again is a real benefit of Steam user reviews, because while the game might review positively in another outlet or on another platform, if this is where you're going to be playing the game, knowing how it runs is a huge piece.
So on Metacritic, it is at 86 on PlayStation 5 and at, hold on, let me make sure that's not. Yeah, that is Dragon's Dogma 2. So it is at 86 on PlayStation 5, 89 on PC. 89 on PC. I mean, that's right up there next to 90. I mean, that is almost an A. I'm really surprised that the Xbox scores aren't in, because this game is also on Xbox. So
it could be. Depends on where they sent out review codes, right? I think that's. But it's been a week at this point. So
yeah. So let's go back to what you were mentioning, which is, hey, are people, review bombing the game essentially, solely for microtransactions? And if people were giving the game a low review simply based on microtransactions, I would definitely call that review bombing. But let's talk a little bit about what it is that people are finding problematic with the game. And I actually had this written up on my Twitter account, but now I don't have it. So there's 5 kind of big ticket items for me on PC why the launch of this game is a problem. Microtransactions by themselves are not the problem. 2 of the microtransactions out of the 20. So I would say the volume of microtransactions is something that probably grates PC gamers a little bit the wrong way for a game. And that brings me to my first point of, I won't say grievance, but just thing that colors and characterizes the game in the ask, right, from the company. This is a $70 game at launch on PC, where yes, maybe we're starting to be conditioned that is the kind of going price for a brand new AAA game of a certain volume, but not every game launches for $70 on Steam. So right away, you create the impression that this is a game for which you're asking people a cover charge to get behind the velvet rope, right? Problem 2 is the two of the 21 microtransactions, right? And I won't even gig them for just the sheer volume, although I think that probably, like I said, grates people a little bit the wrong way, but we'll just tightly couple that with the $70 ask. But 2 of the microtransactions, fast travel and editing your character appearance. I talked a little bit earlier about what an open world RPG is now, today in the industry in 2024. That genre label, I think, has some baggage associated with it, where people have been trained and conditioned enough now over time to have certain expectations that go along with it. If you're going to give me an RPG in 2024, particularly an open world RPG, something like editing my character's appearance is something that I expect to be able to have access to. So that is kind of like a 2-step thing. First, you don't give me access to it, which to me just feels like very petty. And that slides it into the zone of it's now a nuance and it's a bother. I would expect that as I'm, living in this world, which I would think the design objective was to make it immersive, as the design objective for almost all games is, that then I'm telling a story that's in my head. It's a story that you want me thinking about when I'm away from the game. If my approach to modeling my character at the outset is now something that is changed, right, in the part that's going on in my imagination, I expect to be able to change that, right? It's an administrative thing. It's a quality of life thing. I don't expect you to be a gate guard and a gatekeeper and block me from that. So that's the design problem. And these 2 points, I think, are design choices first that might be bothersome. But then when you paywall it, that's the thing that tips people over the edge, right? Between something that would have just been a minor annoyance that they just would have shrugged their shoulders and said, okay, but that's not going to keep me from buying the game. But then you paywall it, and I'll come back why that's such a bother. Same thing about fast travel. Open world RPG today, I expect there to be a more natural, native, organic way of approaching fast travel. Making fast travel a microtransaction to me doesn't necessarily by itself like trigger. Well, let me go back. Not having access to fast travel is okay, right? Without a microtransaction. Yeah, go ahead.
But the items are available. They're just difficult to earn in game.
Yeah, so I'm gonna connect to that in a minute. I'm gonna walk the dog a little bit. So let's just talk about putting any type of barrier to fast travel up. That does not inherently set me off right off the bat. Diablo 4 has a way of doing that. But I play Diablo. But even when I have access to fast travel, even when we had access to fast travel in Diablo games before, right, by finding the portal spots right out in the world, I typically didn't use them. Why? Because I didn't mind the grind, and the grind directly contributes to me earning XP and helping me level up. And it's not something that to me is inherently boring, although it is for some other players. Another analog is Destiny 2. Lots of times, you could use it's not a portal, but you could basically jump right and materialize somewhere, or you could get on your skimmer and drive over there. And a lot of times I would just drive instead of taking the shortcut because I was fine with the grind, because I wanted to kill things, because I wanted to level up. That was okay. So on both of these topics, I think, and I'm not one who falls down the well and says, look, just because there's a microtransaction, that doesn't mean that there was a contrived hurdle for me to jump over. But now when you take two elements that to me are kind of critically tightly coupled components of what I expect in baseline design for a game of a certain type of genre, when you paywall it, what that tells me is that there was unquestionably a point where people sat down around a table and had a discussion about what was the scaling going to be. Because just to make sure that we understand how these things work, first of all, somebody doesn't hit a button and make a microtransaction be implemented in the game. Some developer goes to it and ties it. There's all types of financial stuff around connected on the back end. But the other key thing is that one of the core things that has to be worked out is what is the sliding rule, right? In my analog is a weapons unlock, right? Let's say if I have a weapons unlock and it's in you could skip the weapons unlock for $1.99. Then someone has to make a decision, okay, what is the right amount of kills that a person has to achieve to get that weapons unlock if they don't do the microtransaction? And somebody arbitrarily picks that it's 100. But there's all types of math associated with that. Because what they're trying to find is they're trying to find the point where is a normal going to be okay with it versus when is a person who is canted in the direction of doing the microtransaction going to hit the point where they say, okay, that's too much of a pain in the butt. Let me just go ahead and do the microtransaction. And why is that? Because like I said, there's level of effort associated with implementing the microtransaction, and nobody's going to do that and put it in their budget and put it in their project plan and make a Jira ticket out of it and have a feature branch associated with it so it gets checked in and do the Git and becomes part of the automated overnight. Like, nobody's doing all that unless there's a hook that says, what do I expect to get out of all the stuff that I did that I put into it? So my point is that by doing these things, there's a discussion around, well, this was the person's design choice because they wanted to make the gameplay like that. I'm like, that I'm fine with. But somebody came along after that design choice and said, let's try to monetize this. And that's what I have a problem with. And somewhere in there, somebody set a scale that said, here's the just enough point and here's the too much point, right? So that we could push them to the microtransaction.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, right? Like, there are systems designed around that sliding scale in terms of how far, I remember some of this discussion when Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that there were microtransactions about you could do a permanent double XP boost, right? Like in a single player game, then that became, it's similar to here. There was that discussion of how are the rest of the systems tuned in order to make that just have enough friction that it encourages people to, it pushes them into that purchase. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like on its face, on its surface, offering them is not necessarily the problem. It is the design of the game that incentivizes the purchase of them.
And so those are the first 3 points, right? First 3 things on the bingo card. The fourth thing on the bingo card is, and I may forget one of these things, so I'm gonna skip one and go to the other. But performance, right? And again, this is a game that is. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The fourth thing, since I already said it, actually now I remember, I'll go back, is the save slot, right? Only giving me one save slot on a PC. That's just no. That's not no. Thing number 5 is performance, and here's my thing on performance. If I'm playing on PC, especially, what I expect. Let me go back to the save thing. Sorry. The other thing that's tied into the save thing originates from the expectation that a PC gamer has that pretty much at all times, depending on how long they've been playing on PC, one of the primary reasons you gravitate to PC is because you have an expectation that at all times, at any point, you can hit the escape button and the game will pause and you can do a save on the spot with no baggage or haranguing or nagging or anything like that in your face. So I'll go back to performance. My expectation on PC in this day and age, I'm paying $500 and upwards for a GPU. My expectation is that whatever GPU I have, that the game will play. And that is my, so in terms of like kind of evaluating the goodness of the launch is associated around a scorecard that is, does the game scale across different people's sets of hardware? And in 2024, what I expect is that you hit a minimum performance profile for an Intel Arc GPU, a Radeon GPU, and an NVIDIA GPU that you have at least implemented. I don't like it, but I think I'm going to have to accept at least one acceleration technology, right? Whether it's FSR, DLSS, or XeSS. And you need to be transparent about what you've implemented and what's coming behind it. So the Starfield thing of implementing FSR and then being silent and mum on whether or not they were doing DLSS and when, that's a mess. That's today is unacceptable. But then once you do deploy it, if you put out specs that are minimum, recommended, high end, it should play at those 3 stages and scale appropriately across GPUs and CPUs. And if there's a problem with hitting all those licks, again, you need to be upfront and put it out. Right, less than 60 frames, like less than 30 frames per second on console is something that goes into a list of pros and cons. And then the decision, and then for me, I'm saying this is for me, and then I make a decision whether or not I accept that or not based on what the other pros and cons are. On PC, 60 frames per second is an absolute minimum. Anything less than that is completely and entirely unacceptable today if you're running on modern hardware. So I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts, DBQ?
No, I mean, I think it has such a plethora of issues, right? Like the performance pieces that there's no reason that shouldn't be the case. Well, I mean, there are reasons. It just is. It makes a very disappointing launch, and it is when you combine those with all the other aspects that you're talking about in terms of design issues around the saves or the microtransactions. No matter how anticipated this game might have been because of the kind of cult status and the kind of growth in its awareness and acceptance of the original game, that this is still, I mean, I remember the original game launching and being kind of janky as well. That does not mean, like, in this day and age with the prominence that this was launched at in terms of a high profile AAA big budget or big-ish budget our open world RPG, there's a lot here that could have been, should have been better, it makes it, like you said, not acceptable in terms of those pieces. It will be interesting to see how much of that gets fixed and how much of that is it is going to live with this game for a while. Yeah, lots of good discussion in the chat between Hero Down Under, Wara, Paul's Gaming Live related to performance issues and whether that's what boosts and other aspects here. Thanks for grabbing some of those. Game. Any other thoughts on Dragon Dogma issues related to PC and Capcom?
Yeah, so a couple other I think that I wanted to go over is, I think a lot of the ongoing dialogue and discussion has been around like what should be acceptable and what shouldn't be acceptable for gamers. And the first thing I'll say is it's nobody's right or business, quite frankly, right, to attempt to declare what's acceptable for other gamers or not. That's an individual choice. What I will say is, this. I think some people have been trying to say, well, you're complaining about microtransactions and you shouldn't be, and so you should give the game a chance, or you're complaining about performance and you shouldn't be, and you should give it. No, my point is that it's all of these things in aggregate. And sometimes me as a consumer, I have thresholds where you're going to hit a certain tripwire and I'm going to say, nope, we're done. And then other times, like I said, it's going to be a sliding scale. One of my, major, one of my issues, or I guess kind of perspectives on where I am with this game is, it is the job, in my opinion, the first job of any game is to convince gamers and consumers to get down out of their seat and go and try the game. I know that we have statistics that show a lot of people play genre, and I will say, while I am not vocal about it and I don't get anybody's face about it, it's problematic for me, because what I know that means is that a lot of people, a lot of gamers play crappy games just because they fall within their liked genre. They don't have a lot of quality thresholds. They just go and play that game because that game is in their genre. And I get it. A lot of people do that. I'm not like that. Like I will rather go play a high quality game in a genre that's not my preferred than to play a crappy racing game, even though I love racing games. Now, that being said, what that typically means is I will typically slide like I will typically slide kind of like my review ballpark of what I look for to pull the thread on more detail on a game, but I won't play a bad game. But I think the big thing about the stink around the Dragon's Dogma 2 launch is that it's a bunch, and again, it's specific to PC. It's a bunch of things that were done in aggregate, some of which are going to cross some nopes for certain PC gamers. I think on console, and I hate to use this term because I know some people will try and weaponize it. That's not really how I mean it. But I know on console, there are certain things that are just more acceptable. Checkpoint saves are acceptable on console. Right? I mean, nobody should necessarily have a hang up with that. But they can be done in a way on PC that makes them egregious. If it's not hit the escape button, save anywhere. So that's the type of thing that I mean. But people should understand that there are certain things in my mind that come along with being an open world RPG, and there are certain things that come along with deploying on PC. And then the last thing I'll say is, it's different when, again, these are fandoms that I'm not particularly that I'm not very particular about. It's different when you're a Bethesda game, and it's different when you're a Final Fantasy game. I am sorry, Dragon's Dogma as a franchise does not have that cred. And so, to me, it doesn't get a pass because it's Dragon's Dogma. They sold 7.9 million copies the first time around. I would assume and hope that they want and plan to sell more this time. And in order to do that, they needed to do some things with this launch. I think I'm coming down to near the end of it. Another thing that's like a super bad look about this game is this game launched on 22 March. When does Capcom's fiscal year come to an end? 31 March. Why did this game come out on 22 March? Because it needed to get out the door to claim some revenue before the end of the fiscal year and start working some depreciation off their books for their financial health. And this is a great example, and we've talked a lot about this, about the whole day and date and multiple platforms. This is a great example of a game that I would argue should have launched on console first and then work out the kinks, get your stuff ready for a PC launch, and work on PC later. It's clear from the Steam reviews that it was not beneficial to Capcom to launch this game on Steam right before the end of the fiscal year. Now, financially that may all work out because you get a huge depreciation chunk and you take that off the top here by making it before so. But just from the optics and from just, consumer satisfaction perspective, this probably was a good chance, that this should have been a staggered launch.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of advocating for the staggered launch. And you're absolutely right. We are coming to the end of the fiscal year, the end of the fourth quarter here at the end of March for all video game companies. So getting something out the door, getting that revenue in, certainly is alluring to the bottom line. But what that does in terms of goodwill toward its customers will be interesting to see.
And just because of the comment Paul made, I also want to make one more point of clarity. So, I know what Paul's saying. Paul and I talked, so I don't think Paul actually means it this way, but I just want to clarify from what I've said. I'm not putting any of this on the developers. Everybody should know that it's the sales, marketing, and finance people who have a heavy hand in the vote of when a game goes. So I get that. I don't accept the terminology, lazy devs. I've seen that thrown around. This is not by any means what I'm saying. I do say now my new catchphrase is the version that launches first is the marketing team's version. So that version 1.0 you're buying, that's Dragon's Dogma 2 Marketing Team Edition. And then the developer's edition is the one that comes out, 30 days to 90 days later.
There you go. That's the way to package it. Marketing Team Edition, developer cut, right? This is the, yep. All right. Let's, speaking of games that have taken a while to come out, we got a new story here around Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate. Game Logic. This is coming from IGN.
Yep, by Kat Bailey. Hasbro calls Larian an incredible partner after studio confirms it won't be making Baldur's Gate 4. Larian Studios is officially finished with Baldur's Gate. Director Sven Vinke revealed the news at GDC, confirming that the studio has scrapped its DLC plans and won't be making Baldur's Gate 4. In a statement sent to IGN, a Hasbro spokesperson responded by calling Larian an incredible partner, but offered little insight into what's coming next. What I think this means, and I haven't pulled all the thread together, is I think this means that the contractual deal and the licensing deal between Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, Larian means that Larian had an out clause, right? They had the option to go down the road and do some things, but that there were some exit clauses that they were allowed to pull. Because I don't know. I mean, maybe there was a financial penalty associated with it, but clearly that financial penalty was not anything big enough in comparison to whatever, chest of gold Larian has been hoofing home from all the revenue it's earned off of Baldur's Gate, because neither side mentioned that. So Baldur's Gate 3 has made some $90 million for Hasbro, an impressive sum even as the company has struggled overall, experiencing a revenue decline of 50% and operating at a loss of $1.5 billion in 2023. So, I mean, everybody's, kind of fat, dumb, and happy off of this. Wizards of the Coast, they're coming off kind of some controversy with the Dungeons & Dragons license, and they've canceled a lot of projects. So I don't know where this leaves them. But as far as Baldur's Gate, as far as Larian is concerned, and again, Baldur's Gate 3 is a great game, but it continues a line of evolution of a game design that has been in place at Larian for an incredibly long time. And I could certainly see, why they would want to take this juncture to kind of skew off and go down a different path for whatever their next gig is.
Yeah, no, I think I could see that creatively they may be looking for something different, and I could also see that Hasbro might have, would always be willing to come back to the table potentially, depending on price and where they're at as well. But you've got some more news stories here from GDC. So how do you want to run through these? These are some good kind of talking points here and some potential discussion. Do you want to hit them one at a time, Game?
Yeah, I'll just hit them one at a time and give them some time to breathe. I don't think I have a huge ton of exposition to do off of each of these, except maybe one or two. So the first one I'll start with. So this comes out of a thing called the GDC State of the Industry report, which is something that you can go to the GDC site and download yourself. It is a 37-page report. It is chock full of super interesting metrics and intangible data. We have a lot of conversation that goes on in gaming that is not oriented around tangible data. And is often oriented around assertions of very strong opinions and speculation. But this is the type of stuff that I actually prefer, and most of the stuff that we try and cover on E2K, things that are associated like this, it tends to be where we try and speak to from E2KG. So the first one is 26% of AAA developers. So let me go back a little bit. So part of a lot of this data that's associated, so some of the data that was pulled together is off of like financial data that that the group back at GDC has access to from either NPD or some other data source. Some of it comes from a survey that they do each time they do these things, and they this year they surveyed 3,000 developers, so some of these data points are results of that. So 26% of AAA developers have games being adapted into movies or shows. So one of the things that kind of came out of this report is that where the industry is seeing a lot of, and there's this ongoing theme of like, lack of growth and blah, blah, blah. And I think maybe I didn't put the link in here, but I know I covered that at one point. I may have to, so we do cover that, but I'll go back to it. But one of the areas where they are seeing some growth and some being able to pull some non-traditional gamers over the line is by getting gaming IP in front of them and in front of kind of TV and movie watchers. And those people who are not game goers will see this stuff and will hear from their friends or something. Oh, this is a video game? I think I'd actually like to really play that. So a great example is The Last of Us. So you have some people, I'm not going to say that it's a lot or say it's like super hugely impactful, but some people watched that show and they were not traditional gamers and didn't own a PlayStation. And after seeing the show, they were like, oh, yeah, this is, and so then went off and, bought a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and got into the game. So, right now of that type of stuff, and we've seen things where we've seen huge research, surges of knock-on game sales, right? From the Cyberpunk show that came out, from Telu. I'm not sure what exactly is going on with Halo, but people seem to be happy with Halo Season 2. So I know as a minimum, I've seen some people going back to the game after they'd fallen off of it. So I don't know. I'm personally, now by the same token, for me personally, what I keep saying is, please don't rah pom pom and cheerlead your gaming IP TV show as some type of proof that the gaming company is doing well. Like, look, Xbox is in third place, so please don't say Halo Season 2 is a reason why like Xbox is a great gaming company now, right? From a data driven perspective, right? Let's keep that stuff to what the data actually shows. But I don't know, DBQ, what are your feelings about this?
Just two thoughts really here. One, it doesn't surprise me, right? In terms of we've seen a lot of examples of this, but also in development, adapted, does that mean that they have kind of licensed it or they've optioned it? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's in production, right? Like we've seen plenty of things that have wandered their way back and forth through, trying to find the right director or having people jump in and out of a project. The Uncharted movie is a great example of this, right? It was being adapted into a movie for years before it actually successfully came out. I think the other piece of it here is it does open up audiences. I work at my work. I was talking with a student. I work at a university. They're in a film studies class. They're in a cinema class, and they're analyzing The Last of Us, and as the show, and they are playing the game as well, and looking at camera angles and lighting and characterization. So, right, like it suddenly these connections do kind of open doors, but how many doors they open, we'll see. But yeah, no, I thought that it's not surprising. It's kind of, it is also, we have learned that comic book movies have potentially not running their course and are not as lucrative as they once were. It doesn't surprise me that Hollywood is looking at The Last of Us, The Witcher, the Mario movie, the Sonic movie, and finding another kind of existing IP to leverage.
Yeah, you talk about, broken and canceled projects, right? It's I was reminded recently, because I had completely forgotten. I was reminded recently that remember Tilu was originally supposed to be a movie that was being optioned to Screen Gems. Sam, it was going to be directed by Sam Raimi. But Druckmann wasn't having it. He was not impressed by things that he saw and heard in the board meetings. Trying to get that project off the ground. Also, a reminder that Halo was originally supposed to be a movie, right, helmed by Peter Jackson, and that wound up falling apart. I think there was a point where Spielberg was involved with the Halo project at one point.
Oh yeah, this was mid-teens. Kind of peak Xbox One era, where they announced a Halo TV show. And yeah, Spielberg was attached to it at one point in time.
So one thing that I'm curious about is I've always thought in the back of my mind, like, games are interactive, TV shows are not, but TV shows can be super engaging. Like, doesn't it make sense to have some type of hook right between like the interactivity of a game and like the world building or whatever in a TV show? But anytime we've gone down that path and I've actually seen it implemented, it has been lackluster. And the one that springs to mind is Defiant, which Defiance, sorry.
The sci-fi one, right?
Yeah, so this was a thing, and I watched the TV show. I actually watched the TV show, didn't play the video game. But this was a thing where like an episode of the TV show would come on, and depending on the back and forth between the game, like sometimes like new content, episodic content would come out for the game, and you would play a thing, and then that would be kind of the precursor of something you would see on the TV show, right? Or vice versa. You would continue it. So, DBQ, what are your thoughts of that interactivity between, an ongoing TV property? And I'd also like to kind of hear from the chat if anybody thinks that would be desirable, but then by the same time, I mean, what's in my mind is, but we see what happened with Game of Thrones when the TV show outpaced the book writer. So,
right. I think the challenge there is the development time, right? The ability to know where something is scripted and is going to stay, to be able to then put out a little bit of DLC content that leads into it. I love the idea as like as a old school Star Wars extended universe fan. Like, yes, give me as many mixed media that all tie together. Let's go back to 2008 and EA's Dead Space with a book and a animated film and the game, right? Like those have the potential to be really engaging. I think the challenge is the development, the costs, how much of that needs to be committed to upfront, and what happens when the TV show gets canceled or moved to another network and the license is through the other, right? Like, I think there are a lot of other places where there are challenges there. Go ahead.
What happens when the licensing rights go to Embracer? and then the studio goes somewhere else. So we have those things all over the ground.
They'll allow you to buy back the rights for less than they paid for them. Right. How that works.
Another nit I saw was younger devs are 157% more likely than older devs to support unionization. My personal thoughts on this is, and I mentioned this to Cryptopsy, who some of you guys in the chat know. My take is that when those younger when some subordinate percentage of those younger developers, like you follow the bell curve of their career progression, when they hit the point where there's some percentage of them that become the highly paid, like 6-figure salary people with upward trajectory, that are your knowledge workers and their hands-on keyboard people, and their salaries have started to outpace like their other peers who are graphic artists or some other type of labor category that isn't as in critical demand on the market. That percentage of people, they will flip their vote. They will suddenly become not as interested in unionization. I don't know, DBQ, what are your thoughts?
I think it falls in with the other pieces we've talked about unionization in terms of the potential value for it and the challenges because of the way positions are structured, right? Like going back to what you said in terms of the upper level management piece. It also isn't surprising that it would be, because they are more at that entry level. They are also, as a generation, there is more, like, I would say that we grew up in a generation where the union narrative was much more around the traditional kind of 60s, 70s big industry unions, which have provided a whole lot of safety and healthcare and retirement benefits, but also had a lot of bloat and kind of public sentiment narrative around them. So again, I think it's the challenge here is the challenge here is what IGN just found out, right? Like, you could have a writers guild and vote to unionize and have it succeed, but still have 3 people in that writers guild, longtime members, laid off. So
this is part of my problem. Is I think, well, part of my perspective, I won't say it's a problem. What I think is that those 157%, right, people who are more likely, they haven't seen enough, right? Because they're young developers, because one of the things that you realize as you progress through your career is you start understanding, what do unions do, what do unions not do. Unions don't provide protection against layoffs. Like unions do not prevent layoffs. What unions do is they get clauses in place out of collective bargaining that provide rules of engagement around what layoffs have to look like, but they don't prevent them from happening. And I think I mentioned it on this show before. What they actually do is, what they say is, in the event of a layoff, typically what the union will collectively bargain for is for protection of people based on seniority. That often means that people who are most senior, or who are not necessarily the highest performers, wind up getting protected, while guys who are scrappy, right, and doing the do and are highly talented can still wind up being laid off. And so that's the type of thing where, like, your optics on what you think a union does and what you think a union like start to change, right? When you're highly talented and you start benefiting from that, then you start going, oh, well, wait a second, hold on, I don't necessarily want to be put in the pool with everyone else, right, for collective bargaining.
Paul's Gaming Live hits up a couple here in the chat around trade unions and that their impact, but also that even when trade unions, as he said here, even when they are big in certain areas or industries or in cultures, that greed still finds its way one way or the other. So let's move on. We got 4 other quick hits here from the report. Move on to the next one here around return to work.
Yep. So a lot of return to work mandates going on right now. AAA developers appear to be far more impacted. 40% of them said they currently have mandatory return to office policies, most of them being hybrid, compared to 15% of indie developers and 28% of AA developers. 39% of those are Rockstar employees who are working on GTA 6. I'm just joking. I just added that last part. But yeah, I mean, higher degrees of collaboration expected and needed, more demands around governance for highly budgeted projects, right? I put $200 million behind a project. It's big AAA. I want to know, like, on a week-to-week basis, like, how much % complete are you? What's the likelihood that you're going to hit the launch date? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to, and I don't want to hear that you can only give me a status report every 2 weeks because it takes you that long to do your round tripping between all your people who are working remotely.
Yeah, I got nothing on this one. Like, everything you said makes complete sense, right? Like, for big studios, where you've got more collaboration, more necessary collaboration, when you've got a lot of money riding on it, and you've got a PR marketing budget riding on it, there are a lot more hands in that, and there's a lot more need for the hands-on aspect of it.
Yep. So this other bullet, the GDC State of the Industry report states that the industry earned, so this is big, right? I mean, guys who are in the chat, like, this is the really big one, I think, to pay attention to. States that the industry earned $50 billion more than expected in the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021. In 2022 and 23, spending trends, and I added trends, not the raw percentage dollar values, returned to levels seen prior to 2020, which means whatever the growth curve looked like in those years is what the growth curve looks like 2022 and 2023, which is relatively flat or incredibly like so small that it's barely noticeable. I added the trend, not raw, to stop the whole like record revenue, record profit people. Like, yes, if more people are buying more stuff, then you would expect that the number would go up. That doesn't mean that, right, that the cost of goods sold, right, if that is also going up, then less profits we made, blah, blah, blah. All right. And so then what that means to me is that an accordion-like over-under effect, I'm sorry, not what it means to me. So revenues are expected, what we're expecting for 2024 and 2025 and 2026 is to see a bunch of churn, right? You're basically going to see an accordion-like over-under effect for those years. And so again, we went high in 2021. We came hard down in 2022, 23. We're going to see some oscillating meandering for 2024, 2025, and 26. Growth rates are expected to return to previous levels in 2027. Not pandemic levels, but previous kind of what we think of as healthy levels in 2027. So my point of this, the main reason why I picked this out and why I like latched onto it was, again, I think there's a lot of dialogue around, oh my God, the industry's dying, growth is over, consoles are bad, exclusives are bad. No, time out. We went super high on the pandemic. We went super low to the point where people are depressed and dejected and there's tons of layoffs. I don't mean people are depressed and dejected at the workforce. I mean, people are looking at the numbers and they're depressed and dejected about how they're interpreting those numbers for the gaming industry. Then on top of that, you have a lot of people being laid off. Then what this report says is like, look, this is going to kind of oscillate and you're going to have kind of, and I'm not trying to get political, but you're going to have a lot of what's going on, what the Fed is dealing with right now, right? Where is it a regression? Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? We see recession like dynamic. Do we raise interest rates? I don't know, Bob. Let's just eke it up by 0.2 points, right? Because we're too afraid to do anything because everything is so unpredictable. That's what they're saying you're going to see for the next 3 years, just a bunch of churn. And then in 2027, you're going to get back to a point where there's kind of healthy growth and people feel more confident about the industry. So DBQ, thoughts?
I mean, I think this matches along with what we've been talking about here, what the other data has shown, looking at investment trends, looking at other places of, right, we've seen that spike. We saw it drop off. And the kind of inflationary aspect of studios, of cheap money, and the oscillating piece here is really about finding what that new equilibrium is, right? And finding that new balance. And yes, there will continue to be growth. There will continue to be a lot of sales, but when those sales are not at the same rate level that, from a investor share price type of thing, right? Like they may be higher than they were in 2019, but they're not as high. And so as they were in 2021, there is that expectation. And this is kind of the reaction to it, is where you see the cost cutting measures or the layoffs in hopes of cost cutting. So yeah.
No, go right ahead.
No, go for it.
So here's the last one. And again, I maybe put too much heat on the last one because this is another big one that's important, I think, to pay attention to, given, again, the trend of conversation that's going on right now around the gaming industry. Developers surveyed on their current and next upcoming project reported PC continues to be the main platform of choice, meaning this was a survey question oriented around what hardware are you targeting, what platform are you targeting for your current project and your next upcoming project. So again, PC continues to be the main platform of choice for respondents for both current 66% and upcoming 57% of their projects. 8% reported their current or next project was for the Switch successor. Only 7% reported they were targeting cloud services, and only 1% were working on UGC platforms, which are user generated content platforms, which are like your Minecraft and your Roblox. So these are not numbers indicating a huge upswing in cloud native or Minecraft, Roblox type. This is my analysis. So these are not numbers indicating a huge upswing in cloud native or Minecraft or Roblox type content that can be played on any screen, regardless of hardware resources. So again, this to me sounds like a metric that cuts against the grain of the stated Xbox strategy. The last thing I would mention, here's a huge footnote. The report indicates mobile platforms continue to decline in popularity. When asked what platforms their next games will support, 1/5 of respondents noted having Android or iOS in mind, which is 16% less than 2023. So again, there's currently ongoing narrative about, the kids play now on tablets and phones, and that's what they're going to continue playing when they grow up. I don't know about you, DDQ, but I grew up playing on a Coleco handheld football with little red light blips and the Mattel Dungeons and Dragons thing with the little LCD dude that would fall down a pit if you went left incorrectly. That is not what I played on when I became an adult. Once I gained disposable cash and was able to point that at higher end luxury products, that's what I purchased. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it also goes back to the discussions we had last week around the challenges of mobile development in terms of breaking through, of having sustained success, that it is, as people in the chat mentioned, right? Like when mobile development growth is incredibly high, but most of that is kind of centered in the top 1 or 2% of games released, that makes a huge difference. And so that piece there, I think the development aspect in terms of prioritizing PCs, I think that this is such a positive piece, I guess I would say, right? Like it is in some ways, this is not where we were a decade ago, right? That the PC development has really become a main platform, that as our consoles have become more like PCs, especially the Xbox, that it also makes that a little easier. I think that's where, and also for developers who want to push the capacity of a game in terms of its performance, its graphics, the PC gives them that kind of, an ever expanding ceiling versus the kind of walled garden of consoles.
So a couple questions in chat. Paul says, "Do you really target cloud?" And then Wara says, "Good point. Maybe the results are just worded differently to how the questions were asked." So one thing I would say is, there's potentially a skew here. I'm not sure how many reporting years we've had since Stadia went down, but just a reminder on Stadia. So Stadia was not a one-to-one implementation of whatever your desktop PC game was. It was a port. It was a Linux-based variant of the game that ran. It didn't go through the same type of interpretation layer that goes, that happens with Proton on Steam. So there was work to be done. So that may have pulled some of that down. But my other point is that even when you're going to the cloud is still a target, which means its deployment profile is not the exact same as your on metal version. And what that means is that there has been a drop off where that cloud variant is not included in the bundle of platform targets that projects are going to. And so for instance, when Call of Duty has to go to the cloud, that is going to be a different deployment variant. The way that thing is configuration managed, it's not just going to be tagged off of the mainline branch of Call of Duty and said, okay, just take the same code and send it to the cloud, right? There's going to be some level of delta, particularly when you talk about performance, because as I've talked about on many podcasts, which I think some of you guys in chat have listened to, right? Ballistic arbitration, TTK, all that type of stuff is going to have to, that math is going to have to be recalculated on how you deal with latency between two different opponents, right? Who are shooting at each other. And so there are going to be deltas like that. And what this survey shows right now is that, that is in the mix at a lower percentage. Now, again, that may reverse, in a year after, now that the Activision acquisition is over, those project teams may start picking those things back up. But in the cloud target percentage has been higher in the last few years, right? Because I've looked at this report since it started getting generated in 2011. So those numbers have come down.
Yeah, I think Paul's Gaming Live here, that last piece here with GeForce Now being the biggest cloud service. I think you're right. I think that is the native PC versions, though, is it not, Game? Or do you know with GeForce Now how that ends up setting up?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, from my understanding of technology, I would expect there to be, even regardless of how slight, I don't think it's the exact same thing. I just don't, whether or not you have to put an additional front end on it, whether or not you have to stick a different a service layer out in front of it and connect it with a different API. Like there's just no way that it, whether or not you have to do something to contend, you have to do something to contend with the fact that it's virtualized and it's going through a different layer. And then you consider the fact that depending on which technology is being used, some people may be running it virtualized, some people may be running it in a container. I just don't, like I said, I don't believe you tag off the mainline branch the exact same deployable executable that somebody runs on their desktop and says, okay, put that on a server and have somebody access it. There's going to be some slight delta.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's move on here. We've got a little bit of time left in the show in terms of our run. We're got about 15 minutes left here. So let's move through into our final pieces here with what else you've been playing. So I kind of monopolized my new game piece with MLB the Show. You got a couple of games, and it looks like you're going back to mobile again this week, just like you did last week with the Final Fantasy Tactics Gotcha game. But not that game. You're going a little, this is a tower defense game?
Yeah, so I've been working off my iPad this week instead of the Samsung Galaxy Tab 7. And like I said, I said I was going to depress the amount of obligatory gaming that I did, but I feel obligated to go and report some practical applications of playing mobile games and games on other screens. Since, again, like I said, there's this volume of people who swear that that's the future. Tower defense is a key core genre on tablets. It's one of the better genres out there. Kind of supplants, some things that you might see on PC, like RTSs. So Kingdom Rush is one of the best tower defense games. It's not one of my preferred. I grew up on Field Runners, which is more of kind of an open approach to tower defense, where you set towers up anywhere on the field that you want to. Kingdom Rush is one of these subgenre types of tower defense where there's a singular dedicated predictive path where all the enemies are going to flow down, and it's all choke point management. Whereas on Field Runners, you kind of create your own choke points, which I prefer from a gameplay perspective. But I did play Kingdom Rush. It is a good amount of fun. Again, given the constraints that I talked about before, not like super. Very cartoony kind of graphics, lower end graphics, kind of in the vein of like a Clash of Clans, but it has certain interesting elements. You can call up reinforcements, which are farmers, and so they're militia that can come out. So you put structures that may flow troops out, but you can also call up reinforcements. You have artillery. In between levels, what you can do is you can. You can gain improvements on each of the skill sets that are employed by different tower type units that you deploy to the battlefield. You can unlock certain specials. So you go into battle and you will get like 3 specials to unlock. You can kind of almost think of those as a kill streaks, almost kind of like in Call of Duty, although they don't work quite exactly that same way, but they're on their own cooldown timer. And then you can upgrade each of the individual type of buildings. So there are microtransactions associated with those. You can buy additional gems. Gems are things that you use in the store to gain additional types of specials that you can employ in the game. But again, they are the nice thing that I like about these microtransactions is they are not in your face when you're on the battlefield, right? They're only in your face if you specifically go into that upgrade tree. Even in the in-between battle times. So pretty good game. I'm certainly going to definitely be playing more of it. I think, tower defense has kind of progressed beyond the Field Runners game, which was a 2010 game. I downloaded that too, and I'm going to loop back to it to see how it feels now, but I'll be checking out some new tower defense games as well along these lines.
Interesting. I did not realize that Kingdom Rush dates all the way back to 2011 as well. So... All right, let's move on to your next one, a little bit more in your wheelhouse in terms of your normal rotation.
Yeah, so actually after this show last week, we got off and I think it was this show. Maybe it was this show. Maybe it was BRAP. I can't remember. It was definitely a night after a podcast. I definitely wanted to play something. But my Call of Duty machines were set up for game capture, where I was recording some Let's Plays. So I wanted to play something, but it needed to be quick and dirty, not like super learning curve in the middle of the night. So I grabbed and picked up Grid Autosport on the Nintendo Switch, which I've had for a while. But I'm not sure what went on the first time I did it. Maybe I was tired, sleepy, but there's definitely like game modes that I was like, what the heck am I like, that are not like just point to point, like beat the guy. Like it's, it's things like these modes where they're drift modes and it's a race. Both of you are on the track at the same time and not like on split tracks like you have on rally games, but you're like on the same track. There are points scored for coming in first or getting a better time, but at the end of the day, the round is really won by your drift score. So anyway, I just didn't get that the first time around. There's also a mode where I was listening to last week's podcast and I was listening to you talk about the Formula One game that kind of has retro graphics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Star GP.
And that was kind of foremost in my mind when I was playing this mode. But this mode is it brings up tire wear on the screen, and it's timed, and so it's like an 8-minute round, and it's all kind of about tire preservation. It's all kind of about balancing tire preservation with your pace around the track, because there are points scored. It is point scored based on how well you finish, but the harder you push the car, obviously, the more you impact tire endurance. So you kind of have to balance that whole thing out. So I played that mode today. It was kind of really fun. It was on Abu Dhabi Yas Marina track, which is a Formula One track, which, because it has been newly introduced, since, the tracks that I fell in love with in the late 90s, early 2000s, I've kind of always hated it. But in the last year, I've kind of come over the top to the point where, now I've been racing on this track so much that now I kind of like it. So, but yeah, I'm having a good time with that. I have been playing in docked mode on a 32-inch monitor, so we'll see how I feel about it, as I probably will take this thing with me on a trip later this week and have to play in handheld mode.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, it looks like it's in your upcoming games as well. So I other than baseball, just like you, as you're talking about, jump back into Modern Warfare and Call of Duty. I think I could always put in a sports game in this rotation, as I just today was playing my game of the week within my Madden League against an online player, right? So there's always that going on. But in addition to that, in terms of playing something different, this week on the Epic Game Store, the Skybound game Invincible presents Adam Eve, which came out last November on Steam and on PC. Came out on PC, Steam, and Epic. It is free. It is timed up nicely. It's also, I think, free with Amazon games. If you're in a Prime Gaming and you claim those games, it's there, I believe, as well, as it coincides with the return last week of Invincible, the second half of Invincible Season 2. And it's kind of a visual novel narrative game, but then as you get into battles, right, so there's lots of dialogue trees, there's comic book panels, but then as you're in battles, it is a turn-based RPG to some degree. That there is, you've got action points and you've got different kind of turn-based actions, whether you're defending or attacking, melee or power attack. There's skill trees that you level up that can either boost and this is where it's only about a 5-hour game, so I'll play through it because I like the property. Read through all the Invincible books at one point, and the multi-paths here is that you could do something that's more attack heavy, you could do something that's more dialogue heavy, in order to open up. And I've seen this in the narrative as you're going through chapters. Sometimes if you have, just like your persuasion in a Bethesda game, right? If you have certain points into your dialogue, you may get additional dialogue options. And then because it's Adam Eve who has the power to change atoms, then the other skill tree option is to create, which then gives you additional powers or abilities in battle. Or different ways to troubleshoot as you're going through the narrative. So again, it's free. I don't know that I need to spend a whole lot of time with it. If you are interested in the property, if you enjoy the property, pick it up. It's, I'm enjoying it. It's relatively, it's a new piece of content. It kind of retells it's kind of walks that line of some of the early Adam Eve stories, and it weaves in a little bit from the Adam Eve one-shot animated episode that was on Prime as well. So Skybound Games has been doing, they've got last year they had WrestleQuest. They've got a couple. They did the Renfeld Nick Cage Dracula movie game, which was really just vampire survivors with a skin. So there's some interesting stuff going on with Skybound. Skybound in the comic space has picked up the license for Transformers and G.I. Joe and has been running with it there. So after IDW lost that license. So, I'm if it's got a Skybound name attached to it, I'll be interested to see what it does. They've been pretty intentional about what they've been working on and putting their name with. All right, and while I was just thinking about this week. I have not gone back to Deep Rock Galactic Survivor in a while, but it looks like you're playing good old fashioned Deep Rock Galactic.
Yeah, so I broke out the Steam Deck LCD this week and went after Deep Rock Galactic as my game of choice. Have had a good time with it. It plays surprisingly much better. I mentioned earlier this week that I have this tendency where like certain games, I did the same thing with like Midnight Suns. I was like, there's no way this is going to play good on Steam Deck. And I don't mean plays good from does it get 40 frames per second, but I just mean like be comfortable and enjoyable and like, meet my needs for, visual acuity and, just like the picture of the game that I'm seeing like on that 7-inch screen as far as, how close I have to have it to my face and things, all those types of the ergonomics and all those types of things. There's so many games that I'm just like, this isn't going to be what I want. Deep Rock Galactic actually fits right in the ballpark. It was a game that it's dark and claustrophobic due to that darkness. And so I just thought like playing that on a 7-inch screen is like not going to be fun. But it actually was completely fine. I, was playing it at swim practice, with my kids, because in this program, they go down to the pool and they're with the coach and, there's an outside observation window that you look at, but like the parents are really supposed to stay out of it, and so, I'd check on my kid, every once in a while, but like I don't sit there and like try and micromanage the process. So, so I, took my Steam Deck LCD and had a good time with Deep Rock Galactic. Definitely, not something that necessarily benefits like a good like 15-minute sit-down play session because there's, administrative management associated with your character and all that. So I need to kind of open the aperture on the time window to do that. But definitely something, again, fits in line with the type of game that I want to spend time playing, this year and probably from here on out. These games that never end, these live, games, living games. Deep Rock Galactic definitely fits kind of in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, definitely. I think you answered my question of why you're playing on the LCD rather than the OLED. Is that you were out at the pool?
Yeah, we're completely like there was no risk of splash or anything. It's just I mean I still own the thing, so I got to put some operating hours on it. So
fair enough.
I play the OLED too, but I spend some time on the LCD still.
All right, well let's wrap it up for the night. Game Logic, thanks for all the conversation tonight. Always GDC is. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at those reports. You can remember downloading them back when probably for the last 15 years or so. So, there's always some good data there and some good nuggets for conversation, and actually something that is a little more, I don't know, right? A little more heavy news than some of the kind of rumor reports that sometimes get counted as news within the industry. So, all right, anything looks like Grid Autosports, anything else that is hitting your rotation this coming week?
I'm sure something will come up, but I haven't really. I'm right on the verge of kind of wrapping up the last sessions in a few games, but I haven't necessarily designated, what the flip is going to be yet. So right now, like I said, I'm going to keep plugging away at a Grid Autosport on the Switch.
Sounds good. This week, in Xbox on Game Pass, Monday, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2, which comes to Game Pass. I enjoyed the first Hot Wheels Unleashed, which is also leaving Game Pass as the second one comes. And then on Tuesday, on the 28th, which is Thursday, you get Diablo 4 on Game Pass as well. So Probably be picking up. Chances are, since I've played some Diablo 4, it may give me a reason to go back to it, or at least install it to be able to kind of pick at it here and there. But with Hotly Wheels Unleashed, I'm definitely going to give that a play since I enjoyed the first one. I even made it onto a superlative show way back when the original came out. All right. Thank you, everybody who's been here in the chat. Wara and Paul Goes Gaming Live. And who else we got here? We've had
Hero Down Under came through. Yep. Otacon came through. Couldn't stay, but
here. Yep. Yeah. So thank you all, gentlemen. That is great to have you here. And for myself and Game Logic, we'll be back next week. And Talmaster will be back with us as well.
And so, actually, I will not be back next week, but okay. you and Tal maybe we'll probably be here, but we'll definitely update.
Will probably
everyone.
Not be here next week either. So next week may be a different schedule. So stay tuned. Next week, we've got some travel plans or some company, which is going to throw our regularly scheduled recording into havoc, which is happens from time to time. So stay tuned on when our next one is. But if we're not back next week or we don't have another push for a Monday show, we'll be back in 2 weeks with plenty to talk about at that time. So for myself, DBQ Hams and Game Logic, this has been episode 331 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast for the week of March 24th. Until next time, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.